this was a war, right?
Yeah.
You know, and coal currently supplies 60% of the NEM, right? Of the grid, right?
Yeah.
We would be going to the generals in charge of each of these coal-fired power stations and saying exactly how long is it going to take us to switch on again? Why don't we know the answer to that?
Yeah, so we do know the answer based on public data, and we don't control all those power stations. So quite frankly, we've seen the supply chain of coal coming back in by rail. There are operational issues on Mandalong, which means it's out, and that's geological. Those outages that I've just described to you, they will come back in progressively between the end of June through to August. In the case of one of those plants which blew up last year in Callide, and a very dangerous incident, won't be back till April next year. So getting those back on, there is a variety of outages from small to large that will need to come back. But for the areas in which supply chain is a pinch point, that's the immediate action. And the net effect of that is that there's been unprecedented demand then coming into the gas power stations to actually secure the market. And if you ever want a case for the fact that there will not be one single firming capacity that can support a highly renewable market, today is the example. Because batteries will come in and they'll operate for hours. Pump storage will come in and it'll operate for maybe a good portion of a day. But what we've seen in the power system right now is probably a month or so of low wind, no solar, and the reality is we will need that backup capacity coming in.
I want to jump in there and say, so for the perfect world that many people would like, and that is that we can completely power our nation on wind and solar.
Yep.
This shows that Australia is a long, long way off that reality right now.
Yeah, it's a big change. And I want to be very clear, whilst I think that we need to urgently address the power system issues and getting coal back online, and you can see there's a variety of things associated with that, I'm also an equal advocate that we've got to accelerate into the transition. And I think what this should highlight is that the actual enormity of the challenge to invest in the energy infrastructure required to deliver a net zero ambition is enormous.
So, Frank, just one on that. The Labor Powering Australia policy, which the Treasurer so proudly talked about just then. So that requires $58 billion of private sector finance.
It will require...
If the government intervenes in this market somehow, whether it's through the ADGSM or through another capping retail price or whatever it does, will that not threaten investment certainty, investment in the build out of this transmission, joining up the renewable energy zones to deliver their Powering Australia at cheap prices?
It would depend on the nature of the intervention. I don't think I could give a blanket answer to that. But to get capital to flow into the sector, there's the transmission, but that gets returned through regulatory returns. I think what you're really highlighting, though, is the amount of firming capacity that needs to be there in addition to the renewables is the urgent challenge. And at the moment, you would not pull a trigger on any investment into a backup capacity generation plant without a capacity mechanism that enabled that to be there. So those are the things, if people are playing with that, then investors like us would be looking out over the multiple decades to say, are we going to get a return on that investment? Having said that, I think the private sector is ready and willing to do it. And if you lean into the transition and we recognise we need to build that new cleaner power system, the reality is we need to actually deal with approvals and various other matters that go with it. But there's an enormous investment opportunity over time. I think we're just recognising right now that you do that, but you want to make sure that old system can perform reliably while you're on the way. And I think the goals, socially, technologically, good for the planet and good for customers, I'm a firm believer in that future. I think we need to be really clear, though, that there is an enormous investment required over time. We've got to get on with it, and we've got to take the community and customers with it, otherwise we'll lose the mandate for that transition.